Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges-Watson. Coming up on the programme, as France joins the growing list of countries announcing their recognition of Palestinian statehood, the US President Donald Trump addresses the UN, saying that this decision is merely a reward for Hamas. Coming up, we'll have opinion from Paris and Tel Aviv. Hello and welcome to the programme. Today we continue our special coverage on Palestine. Now, the UK and France have now officially recognised the state of Palestine, making for a historic moment at the UN General Assembly, at which the two-state solution has become a key focus. Well, the French President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement on Monday, declaring that his country could no longer wait for peace in the region. Well, along with France, more than 150 countries have now recognised the state of Palestine. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Manuel Hassassian, who is the Palestinian ambassador to Denmark and the former Palestinian ambassador to the United Kingdom. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Ambassador, President Emmanuel Macron is the latest world leader to announce that his country recognises Palestinian statehood. That's together with Australia, Canada, Portugal, and the UK. Now, you were ambassador to the UK before. I mean, what's your reaction to all of this?
Well, let me start first by sharing with you my reaction to the UK recognition of the state of Palestine. First of all, the problem of Palestine started with the British mandate with the Balfour Declaration in 1917. It has been 108 years since, the British government has been, not recognizing the state of Palestine. But it came at a time now when mounting pressure from the British people as to the atrocious and naked aggression of the Zionist IDF forces, killing and maiming, people, which is a genocide in Gaza, that the Labour Party, with Keir Starmer, as being the leading party, has announced that they will recognize the state of Palestine. However, we know that this statement came back to us in July, where he had put some conditions on the Israelis: the withdrawal from Gaza, the stopping of the carnage, the allowing of humanitarian aid, as conditions for them if they don't want the United Kingdom to basically recognize the state of Palestine. Now, after like almost 2-3 months now, the Israelis have never paid any heed. They never care about UK or any other European countries. They're still continuing with their, assault on the Palestinian people, let alone in the West Bank with the settlers and East Jerusalem and what have you. So this recognition comes as a pressure, mounting pressure from the UK public, and at the same time, the non-acceptance of the Israelis to the conditions of the British as to the recognition of Palestine. Now, this is long overdue, I would say, recognition by the UK. However, the intricacy of this matter is the fact that we haven't seen the area that this Palestinian state would be recognized by the UK, let alone by Macron and many others. They say we recognize the state of Palestine as part and parcel of the two-state solution, where negotiations eventually will lead to the self-determination of the Palestinians and having an independent state. But nobody talked about the stopping of the carnage. Nobody talked about the area which is, legitimized by the international community, 1967 borders being, the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. Nobody was talking about that. So what does it mean to recognize the state of Palestine if you don't have borders, if the occupation does not end, if the carnage does not continue, going on and on and on and on? Then it is an empty, hollow promise. So that's why we should not be highly, jubilant about this decision, as much as we have to be careful that these countries are trying basically to consume the anger of their public opinion and to go ahead and say, we wash our hands like Pilate from the blood of Jesus Christ, but now the Israelis are continuing with their onslaught.
Okay, so you make a lot of points there. I mean, clearly there is symbolism in these announcements, and you've touched on that. But concretely, and I want to ask you from a diplomatic point of view, does this translate into a sort of a diplomatic upgrade for Palestine, given that theoretically the UK, France, and other countries that have recognized a Palestinian state will now be looking at the Palestinians and the Israelis on an even footing? Is that significant?
Well, let me tell you the significance of the recognition on the international level, yes. Now, our missions will become full-fledged embassies with the hoisting of the flag and having all the kind of privileges, immunity, diplomatic, and what have you. Yes, I do agree to that. We will be joining international organizations. We will be part of the international community. We will be full-fledged members of the United Nations. All these are considered to be, assets to the Palestinians when it comes to the international legitimacy, when it comes to the recognition of the state of Palestine. But factually on the ground, what does that mean? If Israel does not stop the carnage, withdraw, and end the occupation, and try to sit at the negotiating table to find the final contours of the state, which means the end of conflict, I don't see that there is a lot of significance there. Yes, on the international level, yeah, our status will be much better than before. We will be having bilateral relations state to state with Europeans, with Asiatic countries, with other, countries in the world. From that perspective, I think we have scored diplomatically and we have isolated, Israel from the world. But in terms of concrete action, I think still the United States of America is not convinced, and it's not on par with Europe and what have you, to come ahead and say enough is enough. Let's recognize the state of Palestine and let's conduct the negotiations state to state and not between an occupier and occupied.
Indeed, and just hearing what President Trump was saying at the UN this evening, it very much sounds exactly the same as what President Netanyahu's been saying these decisions by these countries like France and the United Kingdom are merely a gift to Hamas. But, I mean, clearly President Trump holds the key here. Well, he holds a major key here. And, you're a diplomat. How are you going to win President Trump over and show him and people that think like him, that in fact this isn't a gift to Hamas? How do you win him over?
Well, first of all, it's not a gift for Hamas. It's so unfortunate that 2 years our people in Gaza have endured these atrocious crimes. And for the last 70 years, we have been struggling diplomatically through armed struggle and what have you to gain our self-determination in pronouncing our independent state. And things did not start with October 7 or after October 7. It is the high time for the international community to recognize that the Palestinian is the only people in modern history that have not really accomplished their self-determination. And, paying such heavy prices under occupation, I think it's about time that the international conscience should take an active role in trying to put pressures on the various governments, let alone on Israel, by taking firm stance, like withdrawing their ambassadors, cutting relationship as much as possible politically, try to boycott them economically and whatever. These are the pressures that could change the position of President Trump, feeling that, Israel is isolated, and he knows that for a fact, and the United States cannot keep on justifying acting as the PR and the supporter in bolstering, basically, the Israelis in every single move that is ruining the two-state solution, which is the only game in town, which has been shouldered by the international community for so many years now. So I don't think Trump will continue with this. I think things are going to change. I think this diplomatic recognition, although it has some symbolic significance, but this significance of the recognition should be emboldened by an action plan from European governments in dealing with the state of Israel without putting pressure through diplomatic relations, through boycott and what have you, and not, of course, sending arms to Israel. I think there will be a reconsideration by President Trump.
What do you think about the Abraham Accords as being a major tool at the disposal of the countries that are already signatories and the countries that might one day be signatories? How would you like to see those countries using that particular diplomatic tool?
It is unfortunate that the Abrahamic tool started on the wrong footing and now it is ending on the right footing. The right footing is the basic fact that the Palestinians should be recognized with a state, and then normalization of Arab countries, Islamic countries with Israel should take place. It's not before ending occupation, and that's why the Abrahamic Accord is not significant. And for the simple fact, look what happened in Doha when Israel did not respect the integrity and sovereignty of Qatar and went ahead and bombed Doha. That in itself shows that all these accords are insignificant and they don't have any value when it comes to the facts on the ground. And that's why I believe that Abrahamic Accords were premature, and it had proved its failure because the United States is not fulfilling its promises to the Gulf countries in terms of protection. And President Trump is trying to dodge away from the idea that he was, notified with this airstrike in Doha. And if this proves something, it proves a total failure.
Just lastly, Ambassador, I just wonder if you could explain to our viewers who might not know the history of the Palestinians, who might not know the facts, the Sykes-Picot Accord of 1916, and what it's meant for the Palestinians ever since 1948 not to have a state. What is the reality for a Palestinian person without a state? What does it mean, and what does it mean they can and can't do?
Well, basically, we are not inhabitants. We have a national identity. We kept our national identity. We have always been part and parcel of the Arab world and the Islamic world. Many countries in Asia, Africa, the Arab world have recognized the state of Palestine. But, it did not have any significance because we are under occupation for the last 60 years now. And that's why, we have been struggling, and we never stopped struggling through peaceful means, through armed struggle and what have you, and through political accommodation. We have reached a point where we have a deep conviction that there is no military solution to this conflict. So what is the other option? The other option have been negotiations. And we have embarked on a tumultuous path of negotiations since 1988, when we declared the independence of Palestine unilaterally and accepted that the only solution is through political accommodation. And that's why we went into the Oslo Agreement, believing that this would lead to an independent Palestinian state based on negotiations on par between Israel and the Palestinians and brokered by the United States of America. What happened? Netanyahu comes to power and he destroys the Oslo Agreement by building more settlements, by invading Gaza, by creating new facts on the ground and making it very difficult for the Palestinians to move. And now we have almost 100, gates that closes every single village and city in the West Bank. So we are living in an open concentration camp, and Netanyahu does not pay heed to any of the international laws and orders and what have you. And the United States, unfortunately, unequivocally, is still supporting this Zionist project of creating an entity in a land which is not theirs. And that's why I tell you that the Palestinians will continue in more or less preserving their national identity, in outcrying to the international community that promised them in terms of shouldering the two-state solution, and that the international legitimacy with all the UN resolutions are all with the Palestinian people. What does it take, basically, to America and the rest of the world to recognize that the Palestinians have a national identity, a geography, a demography, a flag, one gun, and one authority?
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Manuel Hassassian, Palestinian ambassador to Denmark. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more now. We can speak to General Dominique Trinquand, who's a former defense advisor to the French President Emmanuel Macron. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us, General Trinquand. Always a pleasure. On Monday, we saw your president, President Macron, formally recognizing the state of Palestine. What do you think drove his decision? How big a factor do you think public opinion was?
I think that really what is behind that is that in the current Middle East position, mainly of Mr. Netanyahu, there is no issue except destruction and except taking out all the Palestinians in Gaza and in Cisjordania. And so I think that really he wants to show that another path is possible. And this is linked to the relation that France has always have in the Middle East with Arab countries. And that's probably why now is proposing to come back to the solution of two states, because Mr. Netanyahu is proposing nothing except war.
I mean, when you look at what's happening in Gaza, and given your military experience, decades of it, does it look like Israel is achieving anything at all in Gaza right now?
No, nothing will. I mean, only destruction. I think that it's probably, the first phase of the destruction before reconstruction by Mr. Trump. The famous Golden State. But in fact, it's just a dream. When you are killing so many people, destroying so many houses and buildings in the area, you are provoking people, and in fact, terrorism is going back. So I don't think, and even the Tzahal, the Israeli army, told to Mr. Netanyahu that it was not a good solution. But anyway, Mr. Netanyahu decided there will be no Palestine anyway.
The Israeli ambassador to France has called this decision hostile. I'm just wondering how his reactions are viewed in France and how President Macron's decision is viewed across party lines.
No, I think this decision is, of course, hostile to Mr. Netanyahu because it's the opposite position of Mr. Netanyahu, but that's in the interest of Israel. There will be election next year in Israel, and everybody thinks that Mr. Netanyahu will no longer be there. And we need to have another solution than war in Israel. So I think this is something which is discussed in France, but nobody is really against that.
I mean, there have been some quite large protests on the streets of Paris and other cities around France. And I'm just wondering how delicate the situation is for the French president, given that France is home to, I believe, the largest Jewish and the largest Muslim populations of any country in Western Europe. This is delicate, isn't it?
If we've got a very large Jewish population in France, that doesn't mean that they are behind Mr. Netanyahu. I'm discussing with a lot of Jewish in France. They are against the position of Mr. Netanyahu. And the difficult situation is when you are French Jewish, you don't have to support anyway Mr. Netanyahu. You can be against that. And that's what I'm seeing in France, really. And when you're talking about manifestation in France, it's not about Palestine and Israel. It's about other problems, retirement and things like that. But we haven't seen this large crowd like we have seen in London, for example.
So would you say that the majority of the French public is behind President Macron in making this announcement about the recognition of Palestinian statehood?
It's difficult to say because France is thinking about other problems currently. But I think that the large majority of France, yes, is behind this decision.
And now President Macron has a difficult task. I mean, he clearly wants to try and persuade President Trump to look at this decades-old problem in the Middle East through the European prism. Do you think President Macron's going to be able to persuade President Trump to look at this in a different way?
I think it will be difficult because Mr. Trump is really trapped by Mr. Netanyahu. I think he's a bit upset by Mr. Netanyahu, but anyway, it is his choice to be behind Israel. So it will be very difficult. I was just listening to the speech of Mr. Trump at the UN, and apparently he doesn't agree with what Mr. President Macron was saying. So I think it will be difficult to change his mind on that.
That's despite the fact that Israel and the United States are going to be looking extremely isolated at that gathering at the UN, given that the number of countries that do recognize a Palestinian state is now more than 3/4 of the member states.
Yes, certainly. I think that on that subject, Israel, after the 7th of October, everybody was praying Israel and was behind Israel. And after 2 years of war, 3/4 of the planet, you have said, is against what Mr. Netanyahu is doing. And I think that United States is also isolated on that matter. And really, we are looking at something which happened 20 years ago when the US decided to change the Middle East by attacking Iraq. 3/4 of the planet was against that. And I think it's the same thing today.
Do you think there's a risk that Israel is going to go in the opposite direction to the direction that France and its allies are hoping, and that in fact they will double down and go down an even more, let's say, extreme path than the path they've been down up until now?
No, certainly, with the policy of Mr. Netanyahu, it's the opposite of the European countries. And certainly he will want to fight for, freedom of Israel for him is a war all the time. And we propose European that he looks at the peace on another way and try to have peace with the country who are around Israel, but also inside Israel, like Palestine. I think that Mr. Netanyahu will never listen at that. So that's why I hope that the next election in Israel will change the government.
How much of a big news story is this in France? Is this front page news, the recognition of the Palestinian state?
No, I don't think so. It's not, we have a prime minister, but we don't have a government. And everybody is expecting that. So I think it's an important subject, certainly, but not on the first page.
And when the Israeli government says to France, you've just rewarded Hamas, this is a gift to Hamas, how would you counter that argument?
No, that's a lie. In the decision, in the paper which was made in July and voted by the General Assembly of UN 2 weeks ago on the 12th of September at the country, it is saying that we must ban Hamas from having power in Palestine, and that Hamas must be disarmed and another Palestinian government must take the place. And so it's completely at the opposite.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed. General Dominique.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, sir. Now, Israel is clearly angered at these recognitions of statehood by different countries and has threatened to respond, viewing the recognition of a Palestinian state as a reward to Hamas. Well, let's get more now from Dr. Eyal Hulata, who is the former head of Israel's National Security Council and a current fellow at the FDD, who joins us now from Tel Aviv. Dr. Hulata, thank you very much indeed for being with us once again here on Arabiya English. There are people in Israel, in the Israeli government, who perceive these announcements by countries like Britain and France as hostile. Why is it hostile?
Oh, good evening, Tom. It's good to be on your show again. First of all, it's I think it's when you scope now the Israeli public, you will find, unfortunately, that there is across the board resentment of this recognition. I think first and foremost because of the timing, Tom. Israel is still at war. I think the priorities could have been to find ways to end the war, to bring back the hostages, to allow a proper next phase of what's happening in Gaza and reconstruction, or in fact, I think for political reasons, both the British Prime Minister and the French President have done something that I don't think helps anyone on the ground. I don't think it helps the Palestinian cause in any way. It definitely doesn't help to bring the war to end or the population in Gaza. But in fact, it is very much political. And I think the response by Prime Minister Netanyahu, regardless of my belief on it, is going to be political as well. So instead of dealing with the substance itself, with the problems themselves, this is a very symbolic, I think, inappropriate, ill-timed recognition that won't do anyone any good.
I mean, it just sounds, listening to what President Trump has been saying at the UN today, calling these decisions a reward for horrible atrocities. It sounds very much as though the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel are absolutely on the same page, aren't they, here?
Well, I think it's not just President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I'm trying to look at it from a non-political position. I'm not a politician. I was National Security Advisor of the previous government. So, it's hard to think that I would support the policies of this government. And in fact, I don't. I think the war has been extended for far too long. And I think there are many things Israel should have done differently. But to call for a Palestinian state that should include Gaza, even if Prime Minister Starmer says that Hamas should not be a part of it, in what way will Hamas not be part of it? In what way is this going to materialize in any way? In what kind of institution, in what kind of process? And you should see, if Hamas is cheering for it in Gaza, then I guess they see this as a reward. So regardless of what you and I or the audience should think about it, if Hamas views this as something that is positive, then I guess there is something in the fact that this is a reward for Hamas.
Fair enough, Dr. Hulata, but that depends if there's anything left of Hamas, because it's very hard to see what's left of Hamas given the devastation on the ground in Gaza. And I don't know, perhaps you can tell us, let me just ask you this, when was the last time Hamas in Gaza posed a meaningful threat to Israel in the form of a rocket or any kind of other projectile fired into your territory?
Well, Tom, I think we should be both honest and sincere about this and intelligent. Hamas did October 7. We can say that this was almost 2 years ago and this doesn't matter anymore. But what happened on October 7 broke so many of the rules, even in the Middle East, that is unfortunately well known in such hard conflict, specifically between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but not only between Israelis and Palestinians. We've seen atrocities all across the Middle East. But we haven't seen October 7, not even in Syria in the height of days and elsewhere. So, to say that Hamas is no longer a threat, this is something that, if this is the case, and I think
I didn't say they're no longer a threat. I was asking you what's left of them.
Response to it. Yeah. Now, what's left of it? What's left of it is a hostile terror organization that is holding 48 hostages still. About 20 of them are still alive, refusing to bring them back, refusing to any sort of deal that would end the war in the sense of bringing back our hostages the way this started, and trying every trick in the playbook to continue this and extend this longer. Now, I will also say, I think the Israeli government should have acted differently. I think we should have pushed to end the war before. But to claim that Hamas is no longer controlling Gaza is just not true. Hamas is continuously hijacking the trucks of humanitarian food aid and other means that is coming into Gaza, either them or thugs working on their behalf, preventing the people of Gaza to getting the aid. Unfortunately, Hamas is still in control in Gaza.
I just want to ask you, clearly 65,000, although maybe you'll dispute this figure, I don't know, maybe you have another figure. We're being told 65,000 Palestinians have been killed during these last nearly 2 years, and that's very difficult for Israel's allies and friends, of which it has a number around the world, who have been vocal about this and said, we can't sit here. I think even Prime Minister Starmer said this was intolerable. Why isn't Israel listening to its allies?
So first, Tom, I lived for the last 2 years in Washington. So it was, I saw this from first row and found myself in many media shows talking about this. And indeed, I think it's very difficult for the Western world to understand the condition that Israel is in. And again, this is not to say that I support everything that has happened. As I said before, I've been speaking for way more than a year that we should find a way to end the war. And the immense number of casualties in Gaza is indeed very high, and so is the damage. And I'm not sure that the extension of the intensified phase of the war is now working in Israel's favor or anywhere close to this. However, I do know that while Israel has entered Gaza in the ground invasion, we were already attacked from all over. Attacks on Israel started on October 8th, way before Israel started attacking, because there is an attack now in Israel, and people are trying to portray the fact that Israel does not have the right not only to defend itself, but maybe even the right to maintain a sovereign country in this territory. Well, I think that we do maintain a right to do this, and I think that we need to fight back, especially after what happened on October 7th. Unfortunately, it's becoming more and more difficult to do this with our friends in the liberal world. And in fact, when 90% of the people in the UK, that's the polls I've been seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, have said that they do not approve the timing of Prime Minister Starmer's approval or recognition of the Palestinian state. Well, yeah, there is a rift. There is a political rift. Some of it is causing liberal leaders to do things that maybe they shouldn't have done in this timing or in this way. We're at war, Tom. We've been attacked. Our villages, our children, our families have been abducted from their homes. We've been attacked in October 7 in ways that I think the world is maybe trying to forget because it's not very pleasant to remember what has happened. And we need to fight. We need to fight for our security. We need to fight for our country.
But I think there is, isn't there, genuine sympathy around the world for 3 or 4 generations of Palestinian people, millions of them, in fact, who've had to go through life completely stateless and with all of the horrors, inconveniences, traumas, and everything else that's associated with that. So do you think perhaps it doesn't come from a good place, this desire from Western leaders to make steps towards giving them something resembling statehood?
Well, Tom, I may surprise you. I'm also sympathetic for them. I'm sympathetic for a people who's been led by bad leaders, who have been taken hostage by terror organizations such as Hamas. And I would want to ask, let's put aside the debate whether or not this was done in the proper timing, because clearly, I have my position and I'm not sure this will get us anywhere. But let me ask a question in this regard. What are the Palestinians going to do tomorrow? Now that those world leaders on the stage of the UN have recognized the right of the Palestinian to statehood, but at the same time they said Hamas shouldn't be part of it. They need to stop the pay for slay, meaning the payment that they give to terrorist families, terrorists meaning those who have murdered Israelis in past decades. What will they do now? How will they use this opportunity that was given to them in building institutions, building schools? Well, there will be a pragmatic material and teaching tolerance, the way I think this is a word that Prime Minister Starmer has used, or President Macron. What's going to happen tomorrow morning with the Palestinians in the West Bank? Okay, there is no war in the West Bank. IDF is not there in every corner like we are in Gaza. The cities of the West Bank enjoy the self-ruling and governance of the Palestinians. What's going to happen tomorrow? And I'm asking this because I am sympathetic with the people. We're talking about millions of people who live there. I would want them to live a better life. I would love them to have a proper job. I would want them to live in a life where they have things to live for and not just reasons for their youngsters, unfortunately, to grab a gun and go and conduct terror acts. I would want to see the Palestinians take this opportunity, now that it's giving them, to do something meaningful with it. But unfortunately, I'm more worried that what we're going to see is just another wave of this self-feeling of being victims of the conditions of the situation, and not necessarily something that is constructive. But let's wait and see for that.
Okay, and obviously there are concerns that these decisions by France, the United Kingdom, and other countries, as we've been saying, could result in retribution by Prime Minister Netanyahu. I mean, he said, on Sunday, I'm never going to recognize a Palestinian state. I mean, do you think, I'm not disagreeing with what you just said, I'm just asking, do you think actually these recognitions by these nations might have the opposite of the desired effect and actually push the Israeli government in the other direction?
So in fact, Tom, when I spoke with my former counterparts, colleagues, or current officials in those countries over the last few weeks, and also countries in the region, my argument was What you're doing right now, and since you're doing this for political reasons, it's very clear that it's done from political reasons. You're pushing Netanyahu to act politically as well. Netanyahu is in a very delicate political situation, as everybody knows. He has we have the most right-wing, unfortunately, government in the history of Israel. Some of them are people who are really ultra-nationalistic. They would want to annex the entire West Bank, something that I do not believe in or do not support, of course, in any way. But since they have done something that is political, it's, I think, likely, unfortunately, that Netanyahu will need to find something political to do on his own side. If they are working to support their bases in UK, in France, in Australia, in Canada, and elsewhere, then maybe Netanyahu will need to do something that is very different. I hope he doesn't do something rash. I hope that this does not result in something that would alter what's left of the normality of the Middle East. The Emiratis, the Saudis have already said that there will be consequences to annexing parts of West Bank. I hope this won't happen, because I think the Abraham Accords were something that has huge potential to revive the Middle East and bring it to something new. We've just celebrated or commemorated 5 years to the Abraham Accords. They survived the war in Gaza. I wouldn't want to see this break over something like this that is purely political. And again, there's nothing constructive or meaningful in any of those actions. But if this set of symbolic political decisions end up with breaking what is left of the things that hold the Middle East together, this will be very, very disappointing. I hope we don't get to that.
Sure, and Dr. Hulata, you actually just anticipated my next question. I was going to ask you if you thought the Abraham Accords were in jeopardy. And since you've already mentioned it, I mean, do you think, I mean, given, as you said, that the Prime Minister of Israel might do something, as you said, rash, let's say he annexes the West Bank or does one of the things he's threatened to do, I mean, the UAE has said, for example, that would be a red line. That would mean, presumably, we can't guess what they mean by that, but that could mean that that there's a withdrawal from the Abraham Accords. That's something President Trump wouldn't want to see happen, would we? Because he wants to grow the Abraham Accords. He wants to see them expanded during his second term. So in fact, does Prime Minister Netanyahu have the freedom to do something rash, given that the consequences would end up being something that would go against what President Trump would like as a desired outcome?
Tom, I believe what's happening, maybe as we speak, Prime Minister Netanyahu will fly actually tomorrow at the end of Rosh Hashanah. We're in the middle of a holiday now in Israel. He will fly to the U.S. To address the UN General Assembly, I think on Thursday or Friday, and we'll have a set of meetings with President Trump. And I would assume that Prime Minister Netanyahu will coordinate a response with President Trump, and that there will be an opportunity for President Trump to maybe guide or signal to Prime Minister Netanyahu where are the borders of things that he believes are relevant in this context that we are in. And I know that both the Saudis and the Emiratis have been delivering messages both to Israel and to Washington about this topic. Look, again, we're in a situation, this shouldn't have happened, right? I mean, this entire thing started from a symbolic declaration that has no meaning. As I said before, I wouldn't want to see things deteriorate over something that is not of substance. If the Abraham Accords survived the war in Gaza, survived October 7, and survived the 2 years later, when Israelis could fly on Emirati Airlines to Abu Dhabi and back, and Dubai, where for a portion of the time we couldn't fly British Airways to London and back. I'm not sure that today I can fly with British Airways to London and back from Israel, but I can fly on Etihad or Fly Dubai. The Abraham Accords have suffered a lot, and they have survived a lot. And the Emirati leadership have said time and again that they believe in the prospect of pragmatism in the Middle East, and they will not let go of this vision. And I admire them. I admire Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed for holding this position. My hope is that we won't find this deterioration. My hope is that in the common thinking between those two leaders, when they will meet in either Washington or New York or wherever Netanyahu will meet President Trump, I hope that they will come with some formula that would allow Israel to feel, would allow Prime Minister Netanyahu to feel on one side, but would not take out everything that was built and leave some prospect of prosperity throughout the Middle East.
Okay, and just last, I mean, do you think there's any chance of the Abraham Accords being expanded or broadened during the second Trump presidency, given that, given what's going on in Gaza, and that has obviously inflame public opinion. I mean, according to one poll I saw, public opposition to a normalization with Israel as things stand right now in many Gulf countries runs around the 90-95% mark. I mean, do you see any chance of that happening?
So first, I think one of the main reasons October 7th happened in the first place was because Hamas and the Iranians wanted to derail the normalization process with Saudi Arabia. We were pretty close back then in October 7, 23. This was Biden presidency, let alone when Trump came in. I think President Trump, as you said, time and again repeated his vision of broadening the Abraham Accords. And in his visit in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, this was a part of it. Look, clearly, the war in Gaza needs to end for anything to materialize. The public opinion cannot change as long as not only seeing all of this footage coming out of Gaza, but a state of war between Israel and any of the Arab neighbors is not something that could lead to some constructive process. But we must all remember that most of Israel's processes of normalization and even peace happened in the wake of wars in the past. The peace with Egypt started after the Yom Kippur War. Even when we speak right now, there are negotiations between Syria and Julani in Damascus and with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister Dermer, talking about some kind of arrangement, maybe not normalization, but some kind of arrangement with Syria. I think the need for pragmatism in the Middle East stands. We need to restore some of this normality, and that includes all of the partners in them. Violence is the root cause of most of the problems that we've seen, and extreme hatred, either by the Iranian extremists or by the Sunni radicals, have time and again brought us into this situation. I'm talking from an Israeli perspective, of course. But Israel's need or aim or vision to normalize with its neighbors is reaching a record high all the time. We're just worried. The Israelis are worried that if we do something that is rash and give another piece of territory to Palestinians, and a terror organization such as Hamas will take over like they did in Gaza. We need to remember, Israel evacuated Gaza completely in 2005, and the outcome we'll see 20 years afterwards, we're still in this situation. But Israelis as a whole, I think more than 70%, maybe 80% of the Israelis recognize that the future of Israel, the prosperous future of Israel in the region goes hand in hand with expanding the normalization, with expanding the ties with the countries around us in the Gulf and elsewhere. And I truly hope that we get to that moment. We need the war to end for this, and we need the pragmatists to go and govern the decision-making all across the region.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Eyal Hulata. Thank you for your time.
Welcome. Thank you.
Now, imagine life today without the World Wide Web. No Google, no social media, no streaming, no email. Hard to imagine, right? Yet just a few decades ago, none of that existed. Well, it was thanks to the vision of one man that transformed the way we live, work, and connect. That man is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web and the author of a new memoir, This is for Everyone, the unfinished story of the World Wide Web. He joins us now here on Al Arabiya English. Thank you very much indeed, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you for having me on the show.
I'd like to talk to you just first of all about your book. This is for Everyone, just hit the shelves. It's being described as part memoir, part manifesto. People are saying it is chirpy in its tone. It's also become an instant Sunday Times bestseller. Just tell us briefly what the thinking is behind the title.
This is for Everyone really is about the web. The web has to be for everyone. That's why it has to be free. It's not. It wouldn't be the same if it was only part of the world used it, or if it could only be used by certain sorts of people or certain sorts of document. So that it's always been a mantra about the web. It's also the mantra which I typed in when I was in the opening ceremony of the London Olympics, and that went around the stadium and around the world.
Oh, right, absolutely. An iconic moment, wasn't it, in 2012 during the Olympics when you sent out that message. Why did you want to write this book? What's the message you want to tell people? Did you think there were misconceptions or myths about you and the internet? Were there things you wanted to clarify?
Yeah, I think, well, very few people who sort of more recent, this current generation have very little idea about where the web came from. And so so telling that story is useful. I know I wrote a book, the last one was in 1999. So a lot has happened since then.
Okay, so clearly you wanted to put pen to paper for the first time in a quarter of a century now. You were born in 1955. That's the same year as Bill Gates, also the same year as Steve Jobs. And unlike them, you gave away your tech and your know-how for very little personal reward by comparison. Why was that?
If I hadn't given it away for free, then it wouldn't have happened. There was a big ask. I was asking everybody to put their stuff on the web, and that's a very, very big ask. You can't also say, and you have to pay me 2 cents a click as well.
So how is it that those men have managed to amass enormous fortunes and you haven't?
Well, because my focus has always been on the web itself, on making sure, I led the industry consortium, which of companies building the web, leading that. You had to be a neutral party. So I worked for MIT at the time. So that's, which is a reasonable, it was a reasonable salary, but it doesn't make you a gazillionaire.
And with hindsight, would you do anything differently? Would you reconsider that financial aspect of things?
Nope. No, not at all. Because I know, looking back, I've seen other things which failed because they weren't free.
I mean, there are some people out there that owe you a massive debt of gratitude. I mean, you could probably say every human on the planet in one way or another, but I'm thinking more particularly about Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. Do you have any contact with them? And have they ever said thank you to you?
Yes, they have. Yes, they've said thank you in various ways, yeah.
And do you approve of how they're using your technology?
Well, it really depends on which one you're talking about. You can't generalize them. Say if you take a billionaire, each billionaire is for instance, what the way Mark Zuckerberg is using technology is very different from the way Jeff Bezos is using it. In a way, I approve of the way some of them are using it more than others. I think a lot of people are focusing at the moment on what's happening in Facebook and Meta and in Instagram. And the whole fact that Instagram and Meta are part of the same thing is, I think some people raise question marks from the monopoly point of view. So the fact that Facebook and Meta are a monopoly is, I think, detrimental to the way the web works in a way.
Well, as its custodian and its godfather, its creator, I mean, you've got an important voice. You've got, the right to express an opinion, and people ought really to be listening to you. I mean, do you think people do listen to you when you express an opinion about how your invention is being used?
Yes, I think they do. And also they sympathize with it. When I say that individual people need to have digital sovereignty, for example, when I say that individual people should have power when they're online, then they feel that. And so they feel it themselves. So that there's a sort of movement of people who've, in the book, I talk about the solid protocol, the movement behind it. I talk about the company in route, which and the people who are working in that movement they feel often that frustration with how the web is right now, and they feel a sort of a really strong urge to be part of building a new system which doesn't have that problem.
So the fact that the web is basically dominated by some giants, some titans right now, it's not quite what you envisaged, is it, when you came up with the idea?
No, the original idea was that you should be able to use it. For example, you should be able to use it in a team for a collaboration. If you're building a project, then together. You should be able to have all the people in the project on the team. The idea was that you could collaborate by anything you could think of about the project, you would put it to the web, and anything that was related in the project, you would link. So the idea was it would be a space of people linking, where normal people made links all over the time. And now if it's on Facebook, it's not really like that.
Just clarify one thing for us. We were wondering here in the newsroom, when was the internet born? I mean, is there a date that we could perhaps put down as being the day the World Wide Web was launched?
So you have to distinguish between the internet and the World Wide Web, because there's 20 years between them. Right? So the date we put on, the date for the web was in 1989, but the internet and email already existed, in fact, before that, 20 years beforehand. So if you go back to the birth of the internet, the original papers about that were 1969. That was Vint Cerf and people working with him. So about 1969 was the internet. 1989, 20 years later, I was working at CERN, and I could see that the internet was a great facility linking all these computers, but people wouldn't. But it's really hard to use for an ordinary person. So there were no websites. There was no click to go from one place to another. So I invented all that, rolled that out. But it was so. And so if you put a date on basically that was the date of the memo I wrote. It was March 1989 when I wrote the date of the memo.
Okay, so March 1989 is the date. Now, you're quoted as saying, we can restore the web as a tool for collaboration, creativity and compassion across cultural borders. We can fix the internet. It's not too late. Why do you think the internet is broken?
Well, the sorts of things I want to, when you're online, you don't feel that sense of empowerment. That's obviously partly, if you're online, you spend your life on TikTok, then you might find a lot of time goes by without feeling very rewarded. In fact, you might. So it's broken largely because of the things which are addictive. So the things like Instagram and which you can spend your time zooming and TikTok. You can spend your time stuck on. If you get stuck on it, then it's addictive, and so that addictiveness, I think, is something which is makes the web worse.
Yeah, indeed, there is an addictive nature to them. I mean, I think a lot of people can sympathise that, including me. Do you find yourself getting hooked on any of these apps? Do you regularly use TikTok and Instagram, Sir Tim?
I don't use TikTok. I used to use Instagram before it became addictive. The Instagram changed quite a lot. I do find myself I follow a link to a YouTube video, and then I'll find myself sort of scrolling through YouTube, watching all kinds of random stuff.
All right, so you do go down the occasional rabbit hole yourself?
I do.
Do you think there was a specific moment, while we're talking about dates, or a moment or a year, perhaps an era that you could put your finger on where you think it went wrong? When did the internet start to go wrong?
That's really hard to put time in it. One date was the 2016 elections. So I was surprised because people said that the first Trump election and the Brexit election, for example, were both elections where people said that it's possible that those people were manipulated on the web into voting for things which were not in their best interests. So that for me, that was I did a double take at that point when and then the Web Foundation sort of looked, and various people have since then looked at it and to try to figure out is that the case. So, but for me, those elections were a bit of a wake up moment.
Okay, so 2016. I mean, just looking back to the inception of your invention. I mean, do you think you'd have done anything differently when it comes to putting up more guardrails, perhaps more privacy. Are there any things you wish you'd sort of done slightly differently?
Well, one thing is if you get a website, then you have to get a domain name. So you have to get whatever it is, .com or .au, and so when you get that, you have to go decide which domain name system that you're going to be which hierarchy you're going to be in, and then you have to pay money. And the domain name system is a hierarchical system, so it's very decentralized. It's got one root, so the domain name system really isn't in the spirit of the web. It's not decentralized. So if I was doing it again, maybe I'd build my own domain name system, which was less centralized.
Okay, so something you'd do differently. I mean, given that where we are, and you sound a bit nostalgic for what the internet and the web used to be like, are there any quick fixes? I mean, for example, I think you're quoted as saying you take issue with how algorithms are used. I mean, is there a quick fix out there to bring it back to more friendly territory?
Well, digital sovereignty is, getting. Well, what can we do to give people that feeling back of power? And so various projects. So if you join a group of people who are building things, but not building things in what we call the attention economy. The attention economy is this economy of your device constantly trying to get you to stay on, the different apps on the device fighting for attention, different sites on the web fighting for your attention, and then using addictive techniques to keep you on it. So the attention economy is what there are some issues with. If we switch it to the intention economy, then when you wake up in the morning, you will be able to use the web and everything on it to your best, in your best interests, to do whatever you want to do. So the intention, switching from the attention economy to the intention economy, is what we have to do to fix this.
Okay, and just lastly, I mean, Sir Tim, artificial intelligence has taken a lot of us by surprise. It's gone leaps and bounds the last couple of years. I mean, is that something that worries you, sort of the general direction in which AI is taking us?
The general direction is taking us, I think, there are lots of wonderful things that get AI, so I'm hoping for lots of great things. I'm hoping for AI to help us find cures to rare diseases and cures for cancer. And so the AI-empowered scientists, I hope, will be doing wonderful things. That said, if we do make a super intelligent power, if we make an AI which is smarter than us, then I think we have to be very careful how we contain it.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.